They strapped the stone wings to Raina Hollowmere before the Dragon Court decided whether she was allowed to kneel. The wings were larger than her whole body, carved from ash-gray mountain stone and veined with dull gold that had gone dark centuries ago. 6 servants were needed to lift them from their iron stand. 4 more tightened the bronze harness across Raina's shoulders until the weight bit through her thin linen dress and pressed against bone. The left wing dragged lower than the right, its jagged feathers scraping the black marble floor with a sound like teeth under earth. No one called it cruelty. They called it tradition. The Ascension Hall rose around her in rings of dragonbone arches and cold white flame. Above the court, a domed ceiling opened to the storm-dark sky where noble dragons circled in ceremony, their real wings cutting through rain and moonlight. Below them, lords and ladies stood in scaled robes, their throats glittering with flight crests, their hands resting on the shoulders of young heirs whose wing marks already glowed beneath ceremonial silk. Raina had no wing mark, no family crest, no right to look upward. She was one of the stone-bound servants sworn to clean the petrified relics of the Dragon Court, cracked talons, broken crowns, severed wing monuments, and the long rows of dragon statues standing behind the throne. Every morning she washed dust from their mouths. Every night she pretended not to hear the stone humming, because stone that hummed was not dead. It was waiting for someone frightened enough to listen and trained enough to stay silent. "Stand straight, High Ascension Keeper," Auric Veilstone said. Raina forced her knees not to buckle. Auric stood before her in white stone robes embroidered with gold thread, his long silver hair bound behind his head, his face smooth with the patience of a man who could make burial sound ceremonial. He held the right ledger in both hands, its cover made of polished dragonstone. "This court rises today," he announced, his voice carrying to every arch. "And before true wings are honored, false wings must bear their proper shame." A murmur of approval moved through the nobles. Raina kept her eyes lowered. False wings. That was what they called the punishment relic strapped to her back. Once each year during the Dragon Ascension rite, someone of low blood was made to wear the stone wings and kneel before the throne. It was meant to remind the court that weight was not flightstone, was not glory, and those born beneath the sky could not steal it by pretending. This year, Auric had chosen Raina, not because she had sinned, because 2 nights earlier he had caught her standing too long before the statue of a dragon with both wings folded over its chest. Because she had whispered, "I hear you," and the statue had cracked. Auric stepped closer. His voice dropped so only she could hear. "You will kneel when commanded. You will not speak. You will not touch the wing veins. And if the court hears so much as one unnatural sound from that stone, I will have your tongue named unfit for prayer." Raina looked at the black floor. "Yes, Keeper." His eyes narrowed. "Good. Servants who know their place live longer." The bronze harness tightened again as the attendants pulled the final chain across her chest. Pain flashed down her spine. The stone wings seemed to sink into her, not by magic but by memory, as if they had been waiting for a body small enough to crush. They did not feel like wings made for shame. They felt like something built to keep a truth from unfolding. Then the hall changed. The throne flame bent low. Every noble dragon outside the dome stopped circling. Dragon King Sorren Auvyrr entered. He did not wear a crown. He did not need one. Black gold armor covered his broad shoulders, each plate shaped like a scale hammered from night. His dark hair fell loose around a hard, beautiful face marked by sleepless command, and his eyes burned amber beneath the shadow of his brow. The air around him carried heat, rain, and something colder than either. Control. Raina felt the court bow before him. The stone wings on her back trembled. Not from her body, from recognition. Sorren stopped halfway to the throne. His gaze moved first to Auric, then to the harness, then to Raina's face. He looked at her as if he had expected to see another frightened servant, and found instead a closed door with something breathing behind it. "Why is she wearing the old wings?" he asked. Auric bowed. "For the humility measure, Majesty." As always, Sorren's eyes returned to the wings. "Those were removed from the rite before my father's reign ended. No king after him was meant to restore them without opening the sealed record first." A thin silence spread. Raina forgot to breathe. "Because they were sealed from public rite," Sorren said. "The old records did not call them ceremonial." Auric's smile remained calm. "Restored by council vote." The court believed the rite had grown too soft. The court believed Sorren said slowly. It was not agreement. It was warning. For one dangerous heartbeat, Raina thought he might order the wings removed. Then a noblewoman near the front spoke with bright cruelty. If the girl cannot bear stone, Majesty, she has proven the point before kneeling. Laughter followed, careful at first, then confident when Sorren did not silence it. Raina steadied herself. She would not cry, not with the statues watching. Auric lifted the right ledger. Raina Hollowmere, oath-bound stone servant of no flight house, you have been dressed in weight before the risen court. Kneel and confess that stone cannot rise. The words struck the wings. Raina's knees bent under the pressure. A sound moved through the stone. Not a crack. A breath. Raina's head snapped up before she could stop herself. The left wing warmed against her shoulder. Deep inside the carved feathers, something whispered her name. Raina. Her lips parted. Auric's eyes sharpened in panic. Kneel. The command hit harder. Raina fell to one knee. The stone wings did not fall with her. They opened. Raina did not understand how to fly them. She understood only that if she let them close, the names would be buried again. A gasp tore through the ascension hall as the massive gray wings spread behind her, not lifting her, not freeing her, but refusing to fold. Golden light ran through the dark veins. One carved feather split from root to tip. Then another. Then another. Gold began to bleed from the cracks. It did not drip like molten metal. It ran like ink. Like names. Letters formed along the feathers in streams of living gold, ancient dragon names no servant should have known, and no court should have forgotten. The statues behind the throne groaned. Dust fell from their eyes. A stone dragon near the eastern arch cracked down its chest. Sorren stepped forward, and this time the horror on his face was not ignorance. It was recognition arriving too late. What did they seal inside them? He whispered. Raina stared at the bleeding wings, her body shaking beneath their weight. The stone answered through her bones. Not monuments. Burials. The cracked dragon statue opened one golden eye. Raina looked at the statues behind the throne and finally understood why their mouths had always been dusty. The court had been keeping them from breathing, and from behind the throne a voice made of stone and pain whispered to the entire court. We were alive when you crowned us. The words did not accuse Raina. They accused the throne that had called burial ascension. And every statue behind Sorren's throne began to breathe dust. Auric Veilstone ordered the wings removed before the first buried dragon could finish speaking. Take them off her. The command cracked across the ascension hall like a stone blade. 4 attendants rushed toward Raina at once. Their hands closed around the bronze harness across her chest, the shoulder chains, the iron locking bar at her spine. The moment they pulled, pain tore through her body so sharply that she nearly lost the strength to stay on one knee. The wings did not simply hang on her. They had opened into her. Each golden vein pulsed against her back like a buried heartbeat. The names bleeding down the carved feathers trembled, then began to fade at the edges as the attendants dragged the wings inward. The cracked statue behind the throne tried to speak again. Only dust came out. Raina understood. Not fully. Not with the clean certainty of scholars and keepers. She understood the way servants understood danger through hands, weight, breath, and the sickening knowledge of what would be lost if she obeyed. If the wings closed, the names would go back into stone. The court would call it silence. Auric would call it order. She drove both hands behind her and gripped the cracked roots of the stone feathers. Do not remove them, she said. One attendant froze. Auric's face hardened. Servant tongues do not direct sacred rite. Raina's fingers slipped on gold bleeding from the cracks. It was warm. Too warm for stone. If you remove them now, the names go back into stone. The hall went still enough for the storm above the dome to be heard. Sorren Auvyrr moved first. Stop. The attendants halted, but only halfway. Their hands remained on the harness. Raina could feel them waiting for Auric's next command more than the king's. That was when she learned the rite did not belong only to the throne. Auric bowed his head by a fraction. Majesty, the Ascension Keeper governs all exposed relics during open rite. Until the wings are sealed, they remain under my office. Sorren's eyes narrowed. Those wings are strapped to a living servant. And that servant has become the instrument of unlawful testimony. Unlawful, Sorren repeated. Auric lifted the right ledger. A crowned stone cannot accuse a living throne. The words landed with the force of law. A few nobles nodded too quickly. Others looked relieved, as if Auric had given them a wall to stand behind. A dragon statue might breathe. A stone mouth might speak. Golden names might bleed across a servant's back. But if the law declared stone incapable of accusation, then the court could pretend not to hear. Raina's hands tightened on the wing veins. Then why are you afraid of its mouth? The question struck the hall harder than shouting. Auric looked at her. For the first time, his calm did not hold perfectly. Sorren looked at her too, but she refused to meet his eyes. Not yet. If she looked at the king, the court would say she begged protection. She was not begging. She was holding a record open with her own body. The statue behind the throne groaned. Its cracked golden eye turned toward the court. Dust spilled from its mouth in slow streams, and beneath the dust came a voice deeper than the first, older than the hall itself. My name was Veyrath of the Eastern Flame. A tremor passed through every dragonbone arch. Several nobles staggered back. Auric's hand snapped up. Seal the Eastern Monument. No one moved, because the word monument no longer fit. The stone dragon's mouth opened wider, splitting along the jaw. I refused the first command to kneel before a bloodline that had not answered the old sky. Golden light ran from its throat down its petrified chest. Raina felt the name strike the wings on her back and enter the veins beneath her palms. Veyrath. The name did not choose her. It passed through the cracks she was keeping open because she had washed dust from that mouth for years and never once told the court what she heard. Another statue breathed. Then another. The rows behind Sorren's throne shuddered. Not like monuments waking from sleep, but like prisoners realizing the door had opened and someone was still holding the bar. Sorren turned slowly toward the throne. Raina saw the truth reach him in pieces. The statues had not surrounded the throne as tribute. They had strengthened it. Each crowned stone had been proof of an ancient flight line, a silent witness forced into obedience, a dragon made into history because living history might have objected. Sorren had been crowned beneath them, and every oath spoken that day had used their silence as consent. Auric stepped between the king and the statues, his white robes shining in the golden bleed. Without crowned stones, no king can prove ancient flight line. Without their silence, Majesty, your coronation has no witness old enough to stand. Sorren's jaw tightened. There it was. Not a servant's punishment. Not one forbidden relic, the root beneath the crown. If Sorren opened the testimony, he threatened the legitimacy of the throne he stood on. If he closed it, the buried dragons would remain the foundation of his reign. Raina felt the attendants begin pulling again. The names dimmed. She gasped and pressed both palms harder into the cracks. Gold flooded between her fingers and ran down her wrists. It burned, but not like fire. It burned like names trying not to disappear. I know where stone holds breath, she said, voice shaking. I washed their mouths for years. Auric's eyes flashed. You polished relics. You did not witness kings. No, Raina said. I witnessed what kings made relics. Sorren inhaled sharply. The golden names began to flow from the wing veins to the floor. They moved like a ledger, learning where the crown had hidden its witnesses. They did not scatter randomly. They moved across the black marble in thin, shining streams, passing between noble feet curling around the base of the dragonbone throne, climbing the first step. Auric saw where they were going. Close the wings. Sorren turned on him. No. Auric's voice dropped. If the names reach the throne, Majesty, they enter royal record. Once entered, they cannot be dismissed as relic noise. Raina could barely breathe under the weight. But if she let the wings fold, the court would turn every name back into architecture. The wings shook against her back. The statues breathed dust. The court stared at the throne steps as the first golden name climbed higher. Sorren did not move to save her. He did not move to stop her. He stood between a law that had made his crown and a servant who was bleeding to make it answer. The first name to reach Sorren's throne was not a rebel's. It was Veyrath of the Eastern Flame, the dragon, named as witness in Sorren Auvyrr's own coronation record. Veyrath's name touched the throne, and the coronation record beneath Sorren's crown began to bleed. Gold ran from the first stair in thin shining lines, not downward but inward, as if the dragonbone throne itself had veins and the name had found the oldest wound in them. The flame behind the seat bent low. The carved wings along the backrest shuddered. Beneath the black gold crest of House Auvyrr, letters appeared in molten light. Coronation Witness Veyrath of the Eastern Flame. Beneath the name, a second line formed slowly. Crown-bearing hand. The court did not breathe. Raina Hollowmere stayed on one knee beneath the open stone wings, both hands locked around the cracked wing veins. The record had left her back and reached the throne, but the pain did not lessen. It deepened. Every golden letter pulling itself from the stone had to pass through the wings first, and the wings had opened through her flesh like a door built from weight. If she let go, the door would close. If she held on, the throne would have to hear what it had been crowned over. Auric Veilstone stepped toward the first throne stair. "Do not let it enter the royal line," he ordered. 2 court guards moved, but Sorren's voice stopped them. "Stand where you are." The guards froze. Auric turned slowly. "Majesty, if that record completes, it will not merely stain a rite. It will challenge the witness by which your crown was confirmed." Sorren stood below the throne, his face lit by gold from the bleeding steps. For the first time since entering the hall, he looked less like a king facing rebellion, and more like a man hearing the floor beneath his life begin to answer. "Veyrath was named in my coronation," he said. "Yes," Auric said. "As crowned stone, as sealed witness, as law." From behind the throne, the cracked statue of Veyrath breathed dust again. Its golden eye burned brighter. "I did not witness him willingly. My claw moved because your right commanded stone. My will did not." The words struck the throne. A line of gold split the second stair. Nobles cried out. Auric lifted the right ledger like a shield. The ledger did not deny the prison. It only renamed obedience as consent. "A crowned stone cannot withdraw consent after ascension," Auric said. Raina's fingers slid in the gold. Her palms burned. "Then let the stone say whether it consented." Auric's gaze snapped to her. "You do not interpret coronation law." "No," Raina said, voice shaking. "I keep the mouth open." A hush followed. Not respect. Fear. Because it was true. She was not flying the wings. She was not commanding the statues. She was not becoming anything the court could name Queen Bride or Miracle. She was holding cracked stone apart with servant hands that had washed those mouths for years. Veyrath spoke again. "I was ordered to kneel at the first crowning of House Auvyrr. I refused until the bloodline answered the old sky. They crowned me in stone and placed my silence beneath every heir who followed." The throne bled harder. Sorren's jaw tightened. Every heir Auric answered before Veyrath could. The first crown stones preserved the flight line. Without them, no king after the fracture could prove ancient legitimacy. "Without prisoners," Raina said. Auric turned on her. "A throne cannot be guilty of using what the law already made stone. Then why did the law need their mouths sealed?" The question moved through the court like a blade under silk. A noble lord near the western arch grabbed his son's shoulder and stepped back. His own flight crest glowed faintly beneath his collar, then flickered as gold light crawled from the throne toward the noble galleries. "Open the doors," the lord snapped. "This rite is corrupted." The great doors did not open. Instead, the dragon statues along the walls inhaled. Dust poured from their mouths. Golden cracks spread across their throats. One by one, stone eyes opened, not fully, but enough to turn toward the houses that had been crowned under their silence. The western lord went pale. From a statue above his family banner came a voice like gravel dragged through flame. "House Veyr claimed ascent under my sealed wing." Another statue answered from the northern arch. "House Cauldron took flight crest from my petrified witness." The hall erupted. Nobles rushed toward the exits. Guards shouted. Young heirs recoiled as the wing marks beneath their ceremonial silk flickered gold, then dark, then gold again. Raina nearly collapsed. The wings pulled against her spine, trying to fold under the strain of so many records waking at once. She bit down on a cry and pressed her hands deeper into the cracks. Sorren saw the motion. His hand lifted. For one breath, she thought he would reach for her. Instead, he turned to the court. "No one leaves." His command rolled through the hall deep enough to shake rain from the open dome. The doors sealed with a thunderous sound. Raina looked at him then, despite herself. He had not closed the doors to protect her. He had closed them to keep the trial from escaping. Auric understood it too. His face hardened. If you allow this, Majesty, every house crowned beneath stone will demand answer. Your court will devour itself. Sorren's eyes remained on the bleeding throne. It has been feeding on silence long enough. The words were not redemption. Not yet. But they were the first time he had chosen the testimony over the comfort of the room. Veyrath's statue cracked from throat to chest. Gold poured from the wound, running along the throne arms and rising toward the place where a crown would rest. The coronation record opened wider, revealing an image inside the bleeding stone. Sorren younger kneeling beneath the very statues. Now breathing dust, Auric beside him with the right ledger, Veyrath's stone body towering behind the throne, as silent proof. Then the image lowered to Veyrath's petrified claw. The claw had been shaped around the crown, not holding it by will, held there by right. Raina saw Sorren watch his own coronation return as evidence. His face did not break, but something in his eyes did. Auric stepped between Sorren and the image. If Veyrath speaks, the throne must answer whether it was crowned by witness or by prisoner. Raina's arms trembled. Blood and gold ran together down her wrists. Then let the prisoner finish witnessing, she said. Veyrath's golden eye fixed on Sorren. The second testimony did not name Auric. It named Veyrath's own petrified claw, the stone hand forced to lower Sorren's crown. Veyrath's stone claw rose in the coronation record, still curved in the shape that had lowered Sorren's crown. The image hung above the bleeding throne in gold and dust. Young Sorren knelt in the memory head, bowed, shoulders bare beneath ceremonial black silk. Around him stood the dragon court, in perfect silence. Behind the throne towered Veyrath of the Eastern Flame, already petrified, already crowned into stillness. One massive claw suspended above the crown, as if an ancient dragon had willingly chosen to bless the boy beneath it. But now the stone remembered weight. Not glory. Weight. Raina Hollowmere felt the memory drag through the wings on her back. The stone feathers pulled against her spine as if Veyrath's claw were attached to her own bones. Her hands tightened around the cracked wing veins. Gold ran between her fingers, hot and thick, carrying fragments of a coronation no servant had ever been allowed to question. Auric Veilstone raised the right ledger with both hands. A stone hand obeying right is lawful consent. The sentence steadied the frightened nobles. It gave them something familiar to cling to. Law, record, right, words clean enough to cover the sound of stone being forced to move. Veyrath's golden eye burned behind the throne. My claw moved. My will did not. The coronation image trembled. Young Sorren looked smaller inside it than the king standing before Raina now. He had not yet learned how to turn fear into command. He had not yet learned how stillness could look like strength. His eyes were lowered, but his jaw was tight, as if even then some part of him had felt something wrong in the air and had not been given the words to name it. Present Sorren stared at the memory. Was I crowned by a witness, he asked, voice low, or by a prisoner made to move? No one answered. Because the throne was answering. The crown in the memory hovered above young Sorren's head. Veyrath's petrified claw descended inch by inch, shaking so faintly that only the gold record made the movement visible. The stone did not want to lower. It resisted in tiny fractures, cracks spreading through the knuckles, through the scaled wrist, up the petrified forearm. Then Auric's younger self stepped forward in the memory and touched the right ledger to the base of the claw. By crown stone, ancient flight line confirms the air. The claw dropped. The crown touched Sorren's head. The court in the memory bowed. Raina nearly fell. The wings tried to fold. She gasped and dug her fingers deeper into the cracks. The names dimmed, then brightened again as she forced the veins open by will and pain. She was not holding power. She was holding testimony. There was a difference the court would never understand unless someone bled long enough to show it. Auric saw her weakening. Remove her hands. Several attendants moved toward her. Sorren turned without taking his eyes from the memory. No hand touches the wings. The order stopped them cold. Auric's gaze sharpened. Majesty, if she collapses, the record collapses with her. Then no one helps it collapse. That was not protection. Not tender. Not romantic. It was worse for the court. It was a king using command to keep testimony open against himself. Raina swallowed against the pain. Then let the hand answer whether it moved willingly. Veyrath's claw in the memory shuddered. Gold light poured from the petrified joints. Inside the record, the stone hand opened not fully but enough to reveal what had been carved beneath the palm, a command sigil burned into the stone shaped like the crest of House Auvyrr. Sorren stepped closer. The gold lit his face from below. Auvyr's voice turned cold. All coronations require command alignment. Without it, crowned stones cannot perform lawful witness. Raina looked at him. You call that witness? I call it continuity. You call a prisoner's forced movement consent because the throne needs it to look willing. A murmur moved through the nobles. Some angry, some afraid, some because their own flight crests had begun to glow and fade beneath their collars. Auvyrr pointed toward the noble houses. If Veyrath's witness is invalid, so is the crown. If the crown is invalid, every title confirmed by that crown weakens. Every house here stands on the same stone. The court understood the trap. So did Sorren. If he rejected the forced witness, he weakened his own throne. If he accepted it, he crowned himself again over a prisoner's silence. Veyrath spoke once more. I was not asked to witness. I was ordered to confirm. The coronation record shifted. Young Sorren knelt motionless as the crown touched his head. The court bowed. The throne flame rose. But behind the rite's music, behind the chants, behind the white fire and black gold banners, another sound emerged. A command. Not Auvyr's voice, not the court's, not young Sorren's. The sound moved through the stone itself, deep and royal. Shaped by the old bloodline that had made dragons kneel before the Auvyrr throne for generations. Veyrath's claw jerked. The crown settled. Present Sorren went pale. Raina felt the command travel through the wings and into her teeth. It was not a word she understood. It was a pressure. A command carried by blood older than the man wearing the crown, older than the rite pretending to bless him. Auvyr's face closed. Too late. The golden record had heard. Sorren's voice was almost a whisper. That was not my voice. Veyrath answered no. But it wore your blood before you learned to speak. Raina's arms shook violently. She could barely keep the wing veins open now. Gold spilled down her wrists and onto the black marble crawling toward Sorren's boots. The court did not move. Even the storm above the open dome seemed to hold its breath. Then Veyrath's stone mouth opened wider, and the next line of testimony carved itself across the throne. The command that moved Veyrath's claw had been spoken in Sorren's own bloodline voice. Sorren had inherited more than a throne. The gold testimony crawling across the dragonbone steps proved it before Auvyrr Veilstone could bury the truth beneath rite law. The command in the coronation record did not sound like one dead king. It sounded older than any single ruler. A royal pressure trained to move through every heir who wore the crown. Raina felt it inside the stone wings before the court understood. That voice had not only moved Veyrath's petrified claw, it had passed through the crown, through the throne, and into the line of kings who would later call forced silence loyalty. Sorren stood beneath the bleeding record, pale in the gold light. Auvyrr closed the right ledger with both hands. Bloodline voice is continuity, Majesty. Not guilt. Some nobles breathed easier. Continuity was a useful word. It made violence sound old enough to be sacred. Sorren did not look comforted. How many times has my voice carried it? Auvyr's face remained smooth. Every crowned ruler speaks with the weight of the line. That was not my question. No, Auvyrr said. It was a question designed to make kingship sound like crime. Raina tightened her grip on the cracked wing veins. The wings were trying to fold again, not because they wanted silence, but because the record was too heavy for one servant's body to keep open. Gold burned between her fingers. Her shoulders shook. Still she held. Veyrath's stone mouth opened behind the throne. The command voice does not ask. It presses will into stone until stillness can be named loyalty. A noblewoman whispered blasphemy. Raina lifted her head. Testimony. Auvyrr turned on her. You are not testimony. You are the weakness through which it leaks. Then your stone is weaker than your throne. The court inhaled sharply. Sorren looked at her, not softly, not romantically, but with the hard awareness of cost. She did not need him to admire her. She needed him to understand that every second he hesitated made the wings heavier. Auvyrr raised a hand. Seal the record before the bloodline voice is contaminated by servant interpretation. Sorren's eyes flashed. No one touches her. The command struck the hall. At once the cracked statues behind the throne stiffened. Their golden mouths began to close. Raina gasped. Stop! Sorren froze. The mouths kept sealing. Gold dimmed along the stone throats. Raina slammed her palm against the nearest bleeding vein. Do not command the room. His face changed. I was stopping them. And the stone heard a king ordering stillness. Silence fell like a blade. Sorren turned toward the statues. One by one their mouths were closing under the weight of his voice. Not because he meant harm. Because the bloodline inside him still knew how to make stone obey. Auric stepped closer. Majesty, command the record closed. It is within your right. Raina looked at him. Within his right, or within your design? Auric's mouth tightened. Sorren stood motionless, trapped between the instinct to control and the terror of what control had always done. Veyrath spoke through dust. Ask. The word moved differently through the hall. Not as command, as invitation. Auric's expression hardened. Crowned stones do not answer requests. They answer right. Raina forced the wing veins wider. Then let the right be shown false. Sorren breathed once. Then he lowered his head toward the statue. Veyrath of the Eastern Flame, he said quietly. Will you continue? The court went still. The stone mouths stopped closing. Gold returned to their cracks. Veyrath's golden eye brightened. Yes. The word shook the throne harder than any command. The coronation record opened again. Young Sorren knelt in the memory with the crown on his head. Veyrath's petrified claw hung above him, cracked from forced movement. Auric's younger self stood beside the throne, one hand over a carved line at the bottom of the coronation page. Raina saw the hidden words beneath the rite. Not witness. Transfer. She read them aloud through the pain. Crown-bearing hand confirms transfer of obedience. Sorren went still. Veyrath answered. When my claw lowered the crown, the command that held me entered the air. Gold split the throne from step to crest. Nobles recoiled. Raina nearly fell, but caught herself against the wing veins. Your crown was not only witnessed by a prisoner, she said. It was fastened to his obedience. Sorren raised one hand slowly to his throat, the place where command lived. Auric snapped. Do not mistake inheritance for infection. Veyrath's voice ground through stone. Call it what keeps the crown clean. It entered him all the same. Sorren looked at the statues behind his throne. Every dragon that had stiffened under his command. Every servant who had gone silent too quickly. Every stone mouth that trembled when he passed. The court had not merely crowned him beneath prisoners. It had given him their forced obedience and called it royal authority. Auric lifted the right ledger again. Majesty, if this continues, the court will question every command you have ever given. Sorren looked at Raina. She was shaking now, gold running down her arms, the stone wings dragging her toward the floor. If she collapsed, the record would close. If he commanded her to stand, the wings might obey by sealing the testimony inside her. So he did not command. He stepped closer and lowered himself until his eyes were level with hers. What can I do without closing their mouths? Raina swallowed against the pain. Do not speak as crown. His jaw tightened. Then what am I? She looked at the bleeding throne behind him. That is what the stone wants to know. In the coronation memory, Veyrath's claw began to move again. Not toward the crown. Toward Sorren's throat. The golden record carved one final line across the throne. The bloodline voice was not born in House Auvyrr. It was taken from the first dragon they crowned alive. The claw in the coronation memory stopped one breath from Sorren's throat. Not touching. Waiting. That was worse. The entire Ascension Hall stared as Veyrath's petrified hand hovered in gold light curved toward the place where Sorren's royal command lived. The king did not move. The court did not speak. Even Auric Veilstone held the right ledger too tightly as if parchment could keep the throne from remembering what stone had already begun to say. Raina Hollowmere could barely feel her hands anymore. Gold had run from the wing veins across her wrists and into the cracks of her skin. The stone wings dragged at her spine with cruel patience. They were not trying to lift her. They were using her as an open hinge between buried testimony and the throne that had profited from it. She forced her fingers deeper into the broken feather roots. The record trembled. Veyrath spoke. The first dragon crowned alive was not a rebel. The throne flame dimmed. He was the voice your house now calls royal. Sorren's face changed. Not with understanding. With refusal fighting understanding. Auric stepped forward. Majesty, this testimony has crossed beyond coronation witness. It is entering Foundation record. Raina looked at him through the blur of pain. That means it was always there. Auric's eyes cut to her. It means a servant has forced an ancient structure to bleed without knowing what will drown. Veyrath's golden eye turned toward the right ledger. The first name was Auvyrr. The hall broke into whispers. House Auvyrr. Sorren's house. The name every noble mouth had spoken with bowed heads for generations. Veyrath continued slower now, each word grinding against centuries of stone. Auvyrr of the first sky refused to crown the first human dragon king. He said command over dragons could not be inherited from a throne. It had to be answered by the sky. A line of gold split open beneath Sorren's feet. Inside it, another memory formed. Not Sorren's coronation. Older. A hall before the throne had dragonbone arms. A sky without the dome. A living dragon, the color of sunlit obsidian, stood chained at the center. His wings folded not in obedience, but in restraint. Around him stood early kings, early keepers, early courts, still learning how to turn fear into ceremony. Raina felt Auvyr's breath move through the stone wings. It was vast. Not loud. Vast. The kind of breath that made every smaller law seem ashamed of itself. In the memory, the first king placed a crown before the chained dragon. Witness me, he commanded. Auvyrr lowered his head not in submission but to look the man directly in the eyes. No. The word shook the old hall. Then the keepers raised stone rods. The command that followed did not sound like one voice. It sounded like many lesser wills braided together until they could imitate power. The rods struck the floor. Stone climbed Auvyr's legs. His claws tore grooves through the black rock. His wings opened once huge and furious before the stone sealed them halfway. Raina cried out as the wings on her back answered that trapped motion. Sorren stepped toward her, then stopped himself. Good. If he touched the wings wrong, the record might fold. If he commanded the pain to stop the stone, might obey by sealing every mouth. He understood enough now to be afraid of helping badly. Auric's voice sharpened. A name taken into the crown becomes inheritance. That is the first doctrine of ascension. Raina forced herself to speak. A stolen name still knows the mouth it came from. The words made the gold flare. The memory deepened. Auvyr's body hardened into stone, but his throat remained gold for one final breath. The first king placed his hand against that throat. The keepers carved a channel from the petrified dragon's command breath into the crown. Not a blessing. A theft shaped like ritual, Veyrath said. They took his refusal and made it a voice that could force others to kneel. Sorren looked at the golden memory, as if it had opened inside his own chest. My name is not only mine, no, Veyrath answered. It is the first prisoner's name worn until the prisoner disappeared beneath the throne. The court recoiled as if the throne itself had become unstable. Noble flight crests flickered again beneath ceremonial silk. Some tried to cover them. Others stared at Sorren with new fear, because if House Auvyr's name had been taken from a crowned prisoner, then every title descended from that command might be less divine than stolen. Auric saw the danger and struck the right ledger with his palm. Enough. The Foundation record cannot stand in open rite. The stone wings convulsed. Raina fell forward onto both hands. The golden names nearly vanished. Sorren's voice came rough. Auric, the keeper turned. Command her to release the wings, Majesty. If the Foundation record consumes her, she dies. If it enters the throne, the court fractures. One command ends both dangers. The trap was perfect. Save the servant by silencing the testimony. Protect the crown by closing the prisoner's mouth. Make mercy serve the old law. Raina looked up before Sorren could speak. No. His jaw tightened. She shook her head once barely. Do not make my survival the stone lid. Pain moved through his face. Oryx's voice grew colder. You hear her, Majesty. She would rather bleed than let the crown remain whole. Raina gripped the wing veins again and pulled herself upright by the cracks. No. I would rather the crown stop needing buried dragons to look whole. A murmur moved through the court. Veyrath's claw in the memory hovered closer to Sorren's throat. Sorren did not step away. What does it want? He asked. Raina listened. Not with ears. With the palms she had pressed to stone mouths for years. With every dusted jaw she had cleaned in silence. With every hum she had pretended not to hear. It wants you to stop wearing the voice as if it was born yours. Oryx's eyes widened. Majesty, do not answer that. Sorren looked at the bleeding throne, then at Veyrath's cracked statue, then at Raina kneeling beneath the unbearable wings. When he spoke, his voice was low, not royal, not commanding. Then show me how to give it back. The throne split open from base to crest, and beneath it, where roots should have been, the court saw a golden throat still breathing inside the stone. The throne did not break apart. It opened like a mouth that had forgotten how to be anything else. Gold light poured from the split in the dragonbone seat, spilling across the black marble and climbing the carved legs of the throne in slow-breathing pulses. Beneath the seat, locked inside the foundation stone, lay a throat plated in living gold. It was not a statue. It was not a relic. It rose and fell with a breath so ancient that every flame in the Ascension Hall bent toward it. Raina Hollowmere felt that breath through the wings on her back. It did not ask to be worshipped. It asked to be heard. The court staggered away from the throne. Noble flight crests flickered beneath silk and scale. Some fell to their knees without meaning to. Others clutched their throats as if the old command voice had pressed fingers around them from the inside. Oryx Veilstone was the only one who did not step back. His face had gone bloodless, but his voice remained steady. Majesty, you are looking at the foundation witness of House Auvyrr. It cannot be disturbed. Sorren stood before the split throne. That is no witness. It became witness by law. It is breathing. So does law when it has survived long enough. Raina's grip slipped. The stone wings jerked inward. The golden throat dimmed at once. No, she gasped. She drove her fingers back into the cracked veins, but her hands were shaking too hard. The record was no longer only passing through the wings. It was pulling her toward the foundation beneath the throne, toward the first breath stolen and dressed as royal command. Sorren looked at her, then at his own hands. He did not command anyone to help. That restraint cost him. Raina could see it in the tightness of his jaw. Kings were trained to act through orders. Sorren was being forced to stand in front of suffering and learn that his quickest mercy might still be another seal. Oryx saw the hesitation and used it. Majesty, if the foundation throat wakes fully, the bloodline voice will fracture. Every royal command spoken from this throne becomes contestable. Every flight crest validated beneath this roof becomes uncertain. Every border oath, every dragon levy, every house ascent questioned. Murmurs broke through the hall. Fear spread fast when dressed as stability. Oryx turned to the court. This is why crowned stone was necessary. A living dragon can rebel. A crowned stone can hold law beyond appetite, grief, pride, and memory. Veyrath's cracked statue answered from behind the throne. A prisoner does not become law because the prison lasts. Raina lifted her head. And silence does not become consent because the court grows comfortable inside it. Oryx's gaze cut to her. You speak of consent, as if kingdoms survive by asking every force beneath them whether it approves. No, Raina said. I speak of breath because I washed mouths you called decoration. The golden throat pulsed brighter. A sound rose from it. Not a voice yet. A beginning. The sound entered Sorren's throat. He stiffened, one hand rising toward his neck as the old bloodline command inside him answered the breath below the throne. Gold veins appeared faintly beneath his skin, crawling upward from collar to jaw. Several nobles cried out. Oryx stepped forward. The throne is reclaiming its voice through you. Resist it. Sorren's eyes darkened. Is it reclaiming or returning? Raina forced herself to listen. The stone wings hummed with thousands of trapped pauses. She searched through them the way she had searched dusty dragon mouths for cracks no court brush could clean. Not all stone held words in the same place. Some held them in jawlines. Some in folded wings. some in the hollow beneath the tongue. This throat held its word behind a name. Auvyrr, she whispered. Sorren looked at her. Raina swallowed hard. Not your house. The dragon. The golden throat breathed once. The whole hall shuddered. Auvyrr's calm broke for a single heartbeat. Do not say that name as separate from the crown. Raina understood then. That was the theft's deepest cut. The court had not only taken a dragon's voice, it had taken his name and worn it until prisoner and throne could no longer be separated without damaging the crown. Sorren understood too. If I give the name back, he said slowly, House Auvyrr loses its foundation. Auvyrr answered at once. House Auvyrr loses the proof that it was ever chosen to command dragons. And if I keep it, Veyrath's voice ground through the hall. Then every request you make will carry a prisoner's refusal beneath it. The words struck Sorren harder than accusation. Raina saw him remember. Not publicly. In fragments behind his eyes. Every servant who had obeyed before he finished speaking. Every dragon who had lowered its head too quickly. Every council's silence he had mistaken for respect, because command had always made stillness look natural around him. The gold at his throat brightened. Raina nearly lost her grip again. Sorren saw it and bent lower, not touching her. Not claiming her, simply placing himself where he could hear. What does the first throat need? Auvyrr snapped. It needs to remain beneath the throne. Raina ignored him. She pressed both palms flat to the wing veins and let the pain sharpen her hearing. It does not want to take your voice by force. That would make it another crown. Sorren's breath caught. It wants you to ask, she said. The court recoiled as if she had insulted kingship itself. Sorren turned toward the golden throat beneath his throne. The old command inside him trembled, eager to shape his words into law. He fought it down. When he spoke, his voice was rough and stripped of ceremony. Auvyrr of the first sky, whose name my house has worn, will you take back what was made royal without consent? The golden throat opened. For one impossible moment, the entire hall heard a living breath answer from beneath centuries of stone. Yes. The word did not strike Sorren. It entered the throne. Gold surged from the foundation into the crown memory above it. The black gold crest of House Auvyrr cracked down the center. Nobles shouted. Flight crests across the hall flared and failed. Auvyrr rushed forward, no longer hiding panic behind doctrine. If the name separates, the throne cannot hold. Raina's body buckled. The wings began to close. Sorren did not command them open. He dropped to one knee before the split throne, lower than the crown, lower than the record, lower even than the stone wings on Raina's back. Then let it stop holding what was stolen. The golden throat breathed again, and the name Auvyrr tore free from the royal crest. The royal crest split without thunder. That made it worse. No great flame devoured the throne. No sky dragon screamed above the open dome. The black gold mark of House Auvyrr simply cracked down the center, and from the break rose a single name in living gold, pulling itself free like a breath escaping a locked throat. Auvyrr. Not the house. The dragon. The name drifted above the throne, bright and wounded, while Sorren knelt below it with his head lowered. For the first time since Raina had seen him enter the Ascension Hall, the air around him did not bend toward command. It trembled. The court felt it at once. Nobles straightened. Guards looked confused. Servants lifted their eyes, and then lowered them again, frightened by the unfamiliar absence of pressure. The old force that had made obedience feel natural around the crown had weakened, and every person in the hall suddenly had to decide what to do with their own body. Raina Hollowmere nearly collapsed beneath the stone wings. The name, tearing free, had dragged itself through the wing veins, through her hands, through every crack she had forced open. The pain had become too wide for crying. Her fingers no longer felt like fingers. They felt like pieces of the same stone she had spent years washing. The golden throat beneath the throne breathed once. Sorren looked up. The name Auvyrr descended toward the throat, like it knew where it belonged. Auric Veilstone moved before it could return. He struck the right ledger against the throne step. Emergency ascension law is invoked. The words cut through the hall with trained authority. Noble panic paused, because panic always listened when law promised a shape. Auric lifted the ledger high. A throne without its foundation name cannot rule. A crown severed from ancient command cannot bind border levy wing or house. Until royal continuity is restored, the Ascension Keeper holds right authority. Sorren rose slowly. His voice when it came was lower than before. Less heavy. More human. You waited for that clause. Auvyrr did not deny it. I preserved it for the day weakness reached the throne. Raina forced her head up. You mean the day the prisoner got his name back? Auvyr's eyes flashed toward her. No servant will define the fall of a crown. I am not defining it, she said. I am keeping the mouth open. The golden throat pulsed. The floating name moved another inch downward. Auvyr's calm broke into action. Seal the foundation. Restore the crest. Remove the girl from the wings. This time the attendants did not run. They hesitated. Without the full weight of the bloodline voice in the hall, hesitation became possible. Auvyrr saw it and turned on them. By right, authority, obey. The attendants flinched and moved toward Raina. Sorren's hand went to the sword at his side. Raina saw the motion and spoke before steel could leave its sheath. If you fight over the record, they will call it rebellion instead of testimony. Sorren stopped. She hated that he understood. Auvyrr wanted violence. Violence could be named treason. Treason could be sealed. The court would remember a servant under forbidden wings, a weakened king with a drawn sword, and a keeper restoring order. Not buried dragons. Not stolen names. Not a throne built over a living throat. Sorren let his hand fall from the sword. Auvyrr smiled faintly. You see, Majesty. Even stripped of command, you are still trained enough to obey the shape of law. Sorren looked at him. No. I am learning where your law expects me to be useful. The first attendant reached for the bronze harness. Raina dug her palms into the wing veins. The wings tried to fold. She whispered not to Sorren, not to the court, but to the mouths she had washed for years. Stay open. Gold flared through every crack. The attendant screamed and stumbled back, not burned but marked. A line of testimony ran across his palm, writing the name of the statue, whose mouth he had once been ordered to plaster shut. He stared at it in horror. Raina understood. The wings were not defending her. They were recording interference. She lifted her shaking voice. Any hand that closes the wings enters the record. The hall recoiled. Auvyr's face hardened. Threats. Record Raina corrected. The statues along the walls inhaled together. Dust rolled across the floor like low fog. From beneath the throne, Auvyrr of the First Sky finally spoke in a voice that did not command. It filled the hall because it was vast, not because it forced anyone to listen. My name returns to me. My refusal returns with it. The gold name sank into the living throat. Sorren staggered as if something had been pulled from his chest. No blood showed. No wound opened. But his face changed in a way the whole court could see. The old royal pressure around him broke. Not completely, but enough that his next breath sounded like his own. Auvyrr slammed the ledger shut. Then the crown is unmoored. No Veyrath answered from behind the throne. It is unanswered. Sorren lifted his head. The hall waited for a command. He gave none. Instead, he looked at the nobles, the guards, the servants, the young heirs clutching their flickering flight crests, and the statues breathing dust behind them all. I cannot command this testimony clean, he said. I cannot make Veyrath willing. I cannot make Auvyrr stolen and call it mine. Auvyrr stepped forward. Then you admit the crown has lost lawful voice. Sorren's jaw tightened. Yes. A sound of shock tore through the court. Raina nearly lost the wings. The admission struck the record harder than any denial could have. Gold surged through the throne steps and raced outward, not randomly, but toward every noble banner carved into the hall. Auvyr's eyes widened. No, he whispered. House crests began to crack. One by one. Not all fully. Not yet. But enough for hidden gold to show beneath their polished surfaces. The crowned stones had not only held Sorren's throne, they had held every house that borrowed legitimacy from it. Raina's arms buckled. The wings sagged inward. Sorren took one step toward her, then stopped himself again. What does the record need now? He asked. Raina listened through the pain. The answer came from many mouths at once. Not as command, as demand. Return what was witnessed without consent. The house banners shook. Auric backed toward the throne, clutching the right ledger to his chest. Majesty, if the houses answer, there will be no court left. Sorren looked at the cracked banners, then at the breathing statues. Then let us find out what remains when prisons stop being called a court. The gold under Auric's own white stone crest flared, and the next name to tear free belonged to Veilstone. Gold tore through the Veilstone crest like a blade finding a seam. Auric Veilstone stepped back from it, but the name followed him across the black marble. It crawled from the cracked white stone banner above the keeper's dais down the carved wall across the floor and toward the right ledger pressed against his chest. For the first time, the ledger shook in his hands. Not from fear, from recognition. Raina Hollowmere saw it before the nobles did. The book was not only a record of ascension, it was stonebound too. Its polished dragonstone cover had a mouth hidden beneath the silver clasp. A sealed little shape she had scrubbed once as a child and been slapped for noticing. She had thought it decoration. Now it breathed. Auric tightened his grip. This is outside royal testimony. Auvyr's golden throat pulsed beneath the throne. Veyrath answered from his cracked statue, no. It is the hand that kept testimony buried. The Veilstone name struck the right ledger. The clasp broke. Pages flew open, though no wind touched them. Gold poured across the parchment, swallowing neat columns of lawful phrases. Ascension. Measure, witness seal, crowned consent. Stone obedience. Relic silence. Beneath them, older writing rose. Mouthkeeper covenant. Raina's breath caught. Auric snapped the ledger half shut, but the pages resisted. That covenant was dissolved before this court was built. Dissolved, Raina whispered, reading through the pain. Or renamed. His eyes found hers. Too fast. The answer was there. The stone wings dragged at her back, nearly pulling her sideways. She braced one knee against the floor and kept her hands locked in the gold-veined cracks. Every record now wanted to open at once. Crown housekeeper servant stone. She could feel them pressing through her bones. Sorren did not command her upright. He stood near the split throne, stripped of the full bloodline pressure, looking less untouchable and more dangerous because he was finally choosing without it. What is the Mouthkeeper Covenant? He asked. Auric's jaw tightened. An obsolete maintenance order. The hidden mouth on the ledger opened. A thin voice came from the book itself. Stone mouths must be washed by hands without crown crest or flight, so testimony may be heard before kings name it law. The hall went silent. Raina felt the words enter her like cold water. Hands without crown crest or flight. Stone-bound servants. Not cleaners. Witness keepers. Auric struck the ledger with his palm. Maintenance servants were never given interpretive authority. The ledger mouth answered. Authority was removed after the first refused sealing. Raina looked at him. You did not make us low because we were useless. Her voice shook, but it carried. You made us low because we were the only hands allowed near the mouths. Gold flared across the floor. Servants along the wall lifted their faces. Some were old, some young. Some had dust permanently settled into the cracks of their nails. All of them had polished statues bowed beneath relics, swallowed sounds they had no right to understand. Auric turned toward them. Do not listen to her. A bitter laugh escaped Raina before she could stop it. That is all you ever trained us to do. The stone wings opened another inch. She cried out but held. Sorren's hand curled at his side. He wanted to act. She could see it, but he had learned enough not to mistake action for answer. Auric lifted the right ledger toward the court. If servant hands become legal witnesses, every sealed ascension can be questioned. Every monument can be reopened by anyone who washed dust from its mouth. There will be no stable law left. Veyrath spoke. There will be law that must survive being heard. The words shook the banners. More house crests cracked. Gold names glimmered beneath polished symbols waiting not yet free. Sorren looked at the servants along the wall. Were you taught the covenant? No one answered. Fear still lived where command had weakened. Raina swallowed. No. We were taught silence. Cleaning patterns. Which mouths to wash first. Which cracks to avoid. Which hums to pretend were wind. A woman among the servants began to weep without sound. Auric's face hardened. Majesty, you see the danger. They know fragments, not law. Raina looked down at the gold around her hands. Fragments. Yes. A servant rarely received the whole truth. She received corners, stains, cracks, the underside of things noble hands never touched. But 1,000 fragments could become a record if someone stopped throwing them away. She lifted her head, then let every mouth finish what we were trained to silence. The statement passed through the wings. Every statue in the Ascension Hall inhaled. Not one. All. The sound was enormous. Dust rose in clouds. Golden seams opened along jaws, throats, wings, claws, crowns, and sealed eyes. The court cried out as the hall became less like a palace and more like a prison, remembering every cell. Auvyrr moved at last. Not toward the throne. Toward Raina. He drew a narrow white stone pin from inside his sleeve and drove it into the right ledger's open mouth. The ledger screamed. The wings on Raina's back convulsed. She fell hard onto both knees. Gold vanished from half the floor. Sorren stepped forward, rage flashing across his face. Auvyrr pointed the pin toward Raina's chest. One more word from her and I seal the keeper channel permanently. Sorren stopped. The whole hall understood. If Auvyrr sealed the channel, the stone mouths might remain trapped even if the throne had cracked. The testimony would become noise again, too scattered for law, too painful for memory, too easy for courts to call madness. Raina tasted blood. Her vision blurred. Still she reached one shaking hand toward the ledger. Auvyrr laughed softly. You cannot read sealed stone without permission. Raina looked at the servants along the wall, at their dust-gray hands, at their lowered heads beginning to rise. I do not need permission, she whispered. I need help. One by one, the stone-bound servants stepped away from the walls. Auvyr's smile disappeared. Sorren did not order them. That mattered. They came because they had heard the mouths, too. A dozen servant hands pressed to the floor, to the statue bases, to the cracked throne steps, to the open veins of Raina's wings. Gold returned. Not through Raina alone. Through all of them. The right ledger burst open around Auvyr's pin, and the mouth beneath it spoke the final covenant line. When crown and keeper both silence stone, the mouth keepers may call the buried court to answer. Beneath Raina's knees, the entire Ascension Hall began to open. The floor opened in circles, not cracks. One ring beneath the throne. One beneath the statues. One beneath the servants, with dust-gray hands. One beneath Raina Hollowmere, where the stone wings still held her bowed between pain and testimony. Gold rose from every circle like breath released through water. The Ascension Hall shuddered as the buried court answered the covenant, not as ghosts, not as blessings, but as living witnesses forced too long into architecture. Dragon mouths opened along the walls. Some voices came as thunder. Some came as whispers. Some could only breathe. But all of them were heard. Auvyrr Veilstone staggered back from the right ledger as its pages turned without his hands. The white stone pin he had driven through its mouth melted into dust. For the first time since the rite began, he looked less like a keeper of law and more like a man watching law remember who had been buried beneath it. This is collapse, he said. Raina lifted her head with effort. No, this is what collapse was built over. Gold moved from the servants' hands into the open floor. The stone-bound cleaners, polishers, carriers, and sweepers knelt around the hall, palms pressed to cracks they had been ordered to ignore all their lives. Raina felt the weight on her back shift. The testimony was no longer passing only through her. The wings loosened. Not because they chose her, because the record had found its keepers again. Veyrath of the Eastern Flames spoke from behind the throne. The buried court is called. Auvyr's golden throat beneath the throne answered with one living breath. The sound passed through Sorren Auvyr's body. He flinched, but he did not command it away. The old bloodline voice rose in his throat like a blade, remembering its sheath. He closed his mouth. Waited. Let the voice pass without becoming law. Raina saw how hard it was. Auvyrr saw too. Majesty, Auvyrr said quickly, you can still preserve the throne. Declare emergency continuity. Bind the mouthkeepers under royal protection. Accept their testimony privately. Give the court a version it can survive. Sorren looked at him. A private truth is another sealed mouth. The realm needs shape. The realm has been shaped around prisoners. Auvyr's voice sharpened. And if you tear that shape apart, what will make you king? The question struck the hall. Nobles looked at Sorren with fear, anger, hope, calculation. Their flight crests flickered like uncertain stars beneath silk. Every house understood now that the throne's wound was also theirs. If Sorren let the buried court answer publicly, no noble title confirmed by crowned stone would remain untouched. Sorren turned toward the dragonbone throne. The split crest above it still bore the scar where Auvyrr's stolen name had torn free. He lowered his head. "I was crowned by a prisoner made to move," he said. The hall fell silent. Auric went still. Sorren continued, voice stripped of the old force. "I ruled from a throne strengthened by mouths that could not refuse. I gave commands with a voice partly taken from the first dragon my house buried alive. I did not build the first prison, but I sat above it." Gold flared across the floor, not forgiving him, recording him. Raina's breath shook. That mattered more than apology. The stone did not need a king who sounded noble. It needed one who would answer. Auric stepped back. "You have invalidated yourself." Sorren looked at him. "No, I have invalidated the lie." The right ledger opened to a blank page. Auvyrr's golden throat breathed once beneath the throne. Veyrath's petrified claw, still visible in the coronation record, slowly opened. The shape that had once lowered Sorren's crown broke apart grain by grain until the claw was no longer curved around forced consent. It was only a hand. Waiting. Raina understood before anyone spoke. The crown did not need to be lowered again. The question did. She looked at Sorren through exhaustion. "Ask them." Sorren did not look offended that a servant had instructed him before his court. He turned to the buried dragons, the cracked statues, the open floors, the servants with their hands on stone, and the nobles whose fear filled the hall like smoke. "If I remain," he said, "it will not be by your silence. It will not be by forced witness. It will not be by stolen voice. Will the buried court permit me to answer for this throne while the prisons are opened?" No command followed. No pressure. Only waiting. One by one, the stone mouths breathed. Veyrath answered first. "Answering is not absolution." Sorren bowed his head. "I know." Auvyrr's throat answered next. "A name returned is not a crown restored." "I know." Then the buried court spoke together, voices cracked, vast and wounded. Then answer standing below testimony. The throne flame went out. The dragon court cried aloud. Sorren stepped down from the throne dais until he stood on the black marble below Raina's opened wings and the circle of mouthkeepers. He did not kneel to perform humility. He stood where the record placed him, below testimony. The stone wings finally released Raina. They did not vanish. They did not turn to living wings. They unfolded behind her one last time and lifted themselves from the bronze harness, rising into the air as an open evidence frame. Every golden name remained visible along the feathers. Raina collapsed forward. Sorren moved, then stopped before touching her. "May I?" he asked. The simple question broke something in her more gently than kindness would have. She nodded. Only then did he catch her before she struck the floor. His arms were careful, not claiming, not commanding. Around them, the mouthkeepers kept their palms to the stone, holding the record open, without her body carrying it alone. Auric Veilstone stood trapped in a circle of gold formed by his own ledger. The pages turned around him, reading every doctrine he had preserved, every burial renamed ascension, every servant oath written to hide witness under labor. He did not deny it. He could not. The ledger mouth spoke the judgment. "Keeper of sealed mouths, you are recorded." Stone rose around Auric's wrists, not sealing his mouth, not burying him alive, but holding his hands away from the book he had used to silence others. Raina lifted her head from Sorren's arm. "Do not make him stone." Sorren looked down at her. She whispered, "Let him answer while breathing." Veyrath's golden eye brightened. Auvyrr's throat breathed. The buried court accepted. By dawn, the Ascension Hall no longer looked like a throne room. Every statue mouth stood open. Every covered name shone in gold. The stone-bound servants were brought from the walls to the center, not as cleaners but as mouthkeepers restored. Sorren did not sit on the throne. He ordered no celebration. He ordered no silence. He stood beside the open evidence wings while Raina, wrapped in a plain cloak and shaking with exhaustion, read the first living testimony into the new record. Her voice was hoarse, but it did not break. When she finished, Sorren bowed not to the court, not to the throne, but to the woman who had kept the mouths open when kings, keepers, and nobles had called silence holy. What will you do now? He asked quietly. Raina looked at the open statues, the breathing floor, the servants waiting with dust-gray hands, and the crownless king standing below testimony. I will keep listening, she said. Sorren nodded once. Then I will answer. He did not walk before her when they left the broken throne. He walked one step behind.